Welcome back to Beauty and the Beasts. Tonight, I will be telling you a story about a woman who loved vintage treasures. The kind of person who saw beauty where most people saw nothing but old, worn out things. But sometimes the past doesn't just leave behind stories. It leaves behind something much darker. In today's story, we will follow Seongju, who, nothing more than an innocent love for secondhand accessories, found herself face to face with something no one could have prepared her for. So grab your tea, blanket, or skincare products and get comfortable. And let me tell you the story of the silver bracelet and the spirits it refused to let go. This is a story about someone named Seongju, someone who loved vintage accessories. Now, Seongju thought of herself as just a collector, but little did she know that one innocent purchase would drag her into a chilling experience, one she could have never seen coming. So what exactly happened to her? Seongju, now in her 30s, used to adore old and secondhand treasures. Before all this, wandering through flea markets and vintage shops was like therapy to her. She loved running her fingers over old, worn-out trinkets and wondering, who did this belong to? What kind of life did they live? You know how some people get fascinated by old buildings and antiques because they seem to whisper stories about the past. And yeah, that was totally Seongju. She felt like secondhand goods were like little storytellers from another time. Among all those vintage finds, her favorite kind? Metal jewelry, rings, bracelets, anything like that. And she always thought there was something special about pieces that had been worn directly on someone's skin for years. Like they carried untold memories and secrets within them. And then one ordinary day, while browsing through a secondhand marketplace like she always did, she stumbled upon this peculiar silver bracelet. It had a thin, delicate chain. But what caught her eye were the strange, intricate engravings covering every inch of it. It was obvious that the bracelet was old, maybe even too old. But that only made it more irresistible to her. And the best part, it was really cheap. Without a second thought, Seongju clicked that buy now button. A few days later, she heard the familiar knock at her door. The parcel had arrived. Finally, it's here. She was so excited, so she tore open the box. But tucked inside wasn't just the bracelet. There was also a handwritten note from the seller. And it was a little off. It said, "Use it carefully." That's all it said. Not something like, "Hope you enjoy it," or "So glad it found a new home," which is what you'd usually expect. No, it sounded more like a warning. But Seongju just shrugged it off. It's probably old and fragile. They must just mean don't break it. And with that, she moved on, completely unaware of the nightmare that was about to begin. So, of course, Seongju tried on the bracelet right away. The cold touch of the metal against her wrist was strangely pleasant, almost mysterious. The delicate patterns engraved all along the chain, they looked like someone had painstakingly carved them by hand. There was something personal about it, almost intimate. She couldn't help but think, what a steal. I got lucky with this one. Standing in front of the mirror, she admired it a little more. The bracelet fit her wrist so perfectly, like it was made just for her, not a millimeter too loose or too tight. It was flawless. But after that day, weird things started happening. At first, it was just a feeling. Inside her home, she would get these random chills crawling up her spine. Even while watching TV, it felt like someone was standing behind her, quietly staring. She'd catch herself glancing over her shoulder more and more, even when she was sure no one was there. And then there were the mirrors. Every now and then, she would swear that she saw something, a faint, dark shadow brushing past behind her reflection. Each time, her body would tense up, but she would try to brush it off. Probably I'm just tired. That's all, she told herself. She was busy, after all. Work, errands, life, maybe she was just overworked. But the strange occurrences only got worse. The feelings weren't just vague anymore. They were sharp, undeniable. And one evening, while washing her face, she casually lifted her head and froze. Behind her, in the mirror's reflection, there was a dark figure. Panicked, she let out a scream and stumbled backward, falling to the floor. When she finally gathered herself and looked again, it was gone. From that point on, she couldn't shake the growing sense of unease. It was no longer something she could ignore. And then, just a few days later, something happened that she couldn't rationalize away. Late one night, after dragging herself home from a long shift, she collapsed into bed. The next morning, as she was about to leave for work, she noticed something strange. One of her shoes, the pair she always left by the front door, was missing. She searched every corner of the apartment, half convinced she must have absent-mindedly left it somewhere. But no matter how hard she looked, it was nowhere to be found. And honestly, who leaves a shoe in the bathroom or in the kitchen? Reluctantly, she grabbed another pair from the shoe rack and left for work. She didn't think much more of it until she came home that evening. The moment she stepped inside, her heart dropped. There it was, the missing shoe, sitting perfectly in the middle of her front entryway. Seongju said she just froze. She couldn't move. The shoe she had turned the apartment upside down for that morning was now calmly waiting for her, as if it had never left. Thing is, Seongju's apartment wasn't the kind of place someone could just wander into. The door, the windows were all secured, properly fitted with locks and safety devices. Nobody could have snuck in, even if they tried. Still, just to be sure, she asked the building management to check the CCTV footage from outside her door. But nothing, not a single sign of anyone coming or going. So she began to wonder, am I just really burnt out? Am I just so tired? After all, when you're tired enough, even shadows start to play tricks on you, right? But from that night on, sleep didn't come easy anymore. Just as she was about to drift off, she would hear it, a low, muffled murmuring coming from behind the wall. At first, she assumed it was just thin walls and noisy neighbors. Happens all the time, right? But then it hit her. No one lived next door. Both units beside hers were vacant. And yet, the sounds continued. Not just muffled voices, but chatter, like a group of people, even children, whispering and murmuring together. She couldn't make out the words. They were all garbled like underwater echoes. But there was definitely something. What sent chills down her spine was that the voices, they seemed to get closer. At first, it sounded like they were coming from far beyond the walls. But slowly, night after night, it felt like they were inside the room, like right in the middle of it. Seongju did what most of us would do, pulled the blanket over her head and held her breath, trying not to make a sound. But the whispers, they never stopped. They would go on for hours before finally fading, leaving her sleepless and terrified. Exhausted and desperate, she finally went to the hospital. The psychiatrist told her it was just stress, prescribed some meds, and sent her on her way. And for a few days, it actually seemed to help. But before long, the whispers returned, louder, closer, even more persistent. Even after getting stronger medication, nothing changed. And then, after about a month of this hell, something happened. One morning, as she was putting on her makeup, getting ready for work, her eyes landed on her wrist. That silver bracelet was still there. But now, there were faint, reddish marks around it. Marks that looked eerie, like fingerprints. Her first instinct was to think maybe she had grabbed her own wrist in her sleep. But that deep, enough to leave clear finger-shaped marks, she wasn't convinced. And that's when the bracelet started to feel wrong, like it wasn't just an accessory anymore. So, without hesitating, she took it off and set it aside before heading out for work. But that very day, Seongju got into a car accident. She was driving to the office when, out of nowhere, another car slammed into her. And here's the unsettling part. The driver who hit her, they told the police they had no memory of the moment, as if they had just blacked out. Seongju ended up hospitalized for a few days, but the nightmares, they followed her to the hospital. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw them. People in old-fashioned clothes, a woman with no head, figures with missing ankles, all kinds of twisted spirits haunted her dreams. Unable to sleep, drowning in insomnia, she finally tried searching online for anyone with similar symptoms. And again, that word came up, possession. At first, Seongju scoffed at the idea. Possession? It sounded ridiculous. But as her symptoms worsened, as the sleepless nights piled up and the hospital visits became routine, she found herself getting desperate. She started digging deeper online, hoping, maybe even needing to find something that could explain what was happening to her. And that's when she stumbled upon something, a simple post, almost hidden among the search results. It said that anyone experiencing these kinds of symptoms should come for a consultation. And the poster was a shaman, one who, according to locals, was well known for their ability to see into the spiritual world. Under normal circumstances, Seongju would have clicked away immediately. Not her thing. But when you're face to face with a kind of fear you never thought you'd encounter in real life, you start to reconsider. So without telling anyone, she made an appointment. A few days later, freshly discharged from the hospital, she found herself standing in front of a worn-down house on the outskirts of town, the shaman's place. The second she stepped inside, an unsettling chill greeted her. The air itself was heavy. For a brief moment, she considered turning around. But then she remembered everything. The sleepless nights, the shadows, the voices, and she knew there was no going back. As soon as the shaman laid eyes on her and asked, almost casually, "You've bought something recently, haven't you?" At first, Seongju shook her head. Nothing came to mind. But then, yeah, the bracelet. So she told the shaman that she bought a bracelet. And then the shaman's face hardened. This person said that is a shinmul. In shamanic terms, a shinmul is an object that once belonged to a shaman, infused with spiritual power, an item that should never end up in the hands of someone unqualified, like normal people. The shaman explained that the bracelet had likely belonged to a shaman who passed away, leaving behind their personal spiritual relic. But without the proper rituals or someone to inherit it, the object had turned into a beacon, calling restless spirits to it, and by extension, to Seongju. The shaman said that is why the ghosts keep coming. They were being drawn to you. With that realization, Seongju knew she just couldn't keep it around. The shaman warned her, if you leave it any longer, they will latch onto you even stronger. Bring me the bracelet immediately. Without a second thought, Seongju nodded and rushed back home. But when she got there, something else sent a chill racing down her spine. The bracelet, which she swore she left on the vanity, was now neatly placed on the bedside table, like right next to where she slept. Frozen with fear, she could only stare. She knew then she couldn't delay any longer, no matter what. Heart pounding, she stuffed the bracelet into her bag, telling herself that at dawn, no matter what it took, she would call in sick, skip work, whatever, and go straight back to the shaman. But that night, something felt off from the very start. The lights inside her apartment began flickering. At first, it was subtle, like a power surge, but then the living room light started flashing wildly, turning on and off like something was playing with a switch. Thinking it might just be a faulty bulb, Seongju cautiously approached to check. That's when she heard something, a soft but chilling giggle echoing from the end of the hallway. She had heard strange sounds before, sure, but this time, the laughter was clearer, sharper, almost playful, and it lingered far too long. She was terrified. She forced herself to ignore it and return to her bed. But just as she pulled up the blanket, she heard another noise, a metallic clink coming from her bag. It was faint but distinct, like the bracelet had moved on its own. Seongju told herself it was just her imagination, but deep down, she knew something wasn't right. Sleep was impossible that night. Every time she cracked her eyes open, she saw the shadows of figures circling her room, slowly, deliberately. Worse yet, hovering near the ceiling were the same spirits she had seen in her nightmares back at the hospital. The woman without a head, figures missing their legs, drifting unnaturally above her, all staring down as if watching, waiting. It's just a hallucination. It's all in my head, she kept whispering to herself, gripping the blanket tightly. Her heart pounded, but she swore to herself, tomorrow I will take the bracelet to the shaman. The next morning, with dark circles under her eyes and trembling hands, she set out, determined to get rid of the bracelet once and for all. But halfway there, her car began to rattle uncontrollably. Panicked, she pulled over to the side of the empty road. A sharp, metallic screech rang from the engine, but when she got out to check, nothing seemed wrong. The engine started back up like nothing happened. But when she glanced at the rearview mirror, a mass of long, black hair was visible in the backseat. Her blood ran cold. Without turning her head, she clung to the steering wheel and mumbled prayers. Buddha, God, anyone, please just help me get there safely, and forced herself to keep driving. And then, as if that wasn't enough, a few kilometers down the road, she saw them, a small group of people, like standing still right in the middle of the empty street. They were wearing old, faded hanbok, like traditional Korean clothes, staring straight at her, faces blank, unmoving. There were no other cars around, no witnesses, just her and them. She swerved quickly, taking a detour, pushing through the narrow roads to escape. And finally, after what felt like hours for a drive that should have taken only one, she arrived at the shaman's house. The sun was already low in the sky. And when she knocked, the shaman burst out. The shaman said, "You made it. Good. You did well," already knowing somehow that the journey had been anything but smooth. Seongju reached for her bag to hand over the bracelet, but the zipper wouldn't budge. It felt like something was pulling it shut from inside. Using all her strength, she finally yanked it open, accidentally flinging the bag to the ground. And its contents spilled everywhere. And among them, there it was, the silver bracelet. As the bracelet rolled across the floor, the sound it made was unlike anything she'd heard before. Not just metal clinking, but sharp, piercing, almost like a scream disguised as a sound. Seongju knew this wasn't just an old bracelet anymore. The shaman wasted no time. Grabbing the bracelet, this person immediately started preparing. Incense, talismans, all laid out in a practiced rhythm. And then, as if on cue, the noises began. She heard countless voices gathering just beyond the door, whispering, murmuring, scratching. The shaman told her, ignore whatever you hear. Never look up. Just close your eyes and pray. The shaman's chanting grew louder, faster, almost like a battle cry. The shaman placed the bracelet directly over the burning incense and set the talisman on fire. In seconds, thick, suffocating smoke filled the room. And then came the screams, ear-splitting, gut-wrenching screams. Seongju sat frozen. But in that moment, it all came rushing back. The nightmare spirits from the hospital, the faceless ghosts, the ones floating, watching from the corners of her room, flashing through her mind like a cursed film reel. The screams outside the door grew wilder, angrier. Shadows began writhing against the paper door like they were pounding, clawing to get inside. The shaman didn't even flinch. The shaman kept chanting, kept feeding the talisman to the flames. Eventually, the incense burned down, the talisman turned black, and the room grew still. Seongju looked at the bracelet. The once shimmering silver had turned dark, tarnished, almost charred. It's done, the shaman finally said. Then, without missing a beat, the shaman added, if you had waited even a little longer, you would have ended up insane, completely gone. But I guess you had just enough luck to make it here in time. Hearing those words, all the tension Seongju had been carrying seemed to crash down on her at once. Her legs gave out, and she sank helplessly to the floor. Since that day, Seongju has never, ever touched another vintage item. And the spirits, the whispers, the shadows, she has never seen them again. But still, when you think about it, what exactly did Seongju experience? And what other stories could be hidden behind those vintage treasures, quietly waiting for their next owner? And that was the story of Seongju and her silver bracelet. A beautiful find, or so it seemed. But sometimes the past doesn't fade quietly. Sometimes it lingers, watching, waiting until the right person comes along. Seongju never touched another vintage item again. But who's to say the next person will be so lucky? Okay, that's the end of today's story, and thank you so much for joining me tonight on Beauty and the Beasts. Sleep tight if you can, and I will see you in our next episode. Bye-bye.